The committee will come to order. Madam Secretary, it is a pleasure to welcome you to our committee for the first time as chairman. In order to maximize our time for discussion, after my opening remarks and those of my good friend, the ranking member, Mr. Berman, I ask that you summarize your written testimony, and then we will move directly into questions from members. Madam Secretary, we must maintain firm ties with our allies, and enemies must be clearly identified. I hope that this administration can tell who's who. In Lebanon, we have witnessed the conquest of the country by the Iran-Syria-Hezbollah axis. The U.S. should never have been supporting a government with Hezbollah. Now with Hezbollah in control, what is the justification for continued U.S. taxpayer investment? In Egypt and elsewhere, successive U.S. administrations failed to move beyond the status quo and prepare for the future. We should not associate the protests in Jordan and Bahrain with events transpiring in Tripoli, Cairo, and Beirut. But there is one constant. We have failed to effectively use our resources to help build strong, accountable institutions that protect basic human rights. This administration's prior decision to cut support from pro-democracy civil groups in Egypt and to only fund groups pre-cleared with the Mubarak government is a mistake we must never repeat. Then there's the mistake of the Bush administration, and continued under the current administration, to conduct business as usual with the Libyan regime following the lifting of UN Security Council sanctions imposed in response to Libya's state-sponsored attacks, which claimed the lives of many, including Melina Hudson and John Cummock. John's wife, Victoria, my constituent, and Melina's father and aunt are in the audience today. Madam Secretary, I have a letter that they have written requesting yours and Director Miller's help in securing information on the role of Gaddafi and others in attacks on Western targets in the 80s and the 90s. Some of us objected to the normalization of relations with the Libyan regime, raising its deplorable human rights record. Regrettably, Libya's deployment of fighter jets and tanks to murder those daring to express a desire for freedom is proof that the oppressors cannot be coddled or engaged. Then the UN Human Rights Council refused to do anything about Libya's gross human rights abuses. On the contrary, Libya was elected to the Human Rights Council last year. Days ago, the Council was forced to act due to Gaddafi's regime's slaughter of hundreds of people in the streets. However, another UN entity, the Security Council, did find time just weeks ago to target our democratic ally, Israel. The United States needs to condition its funding for the UN on real reforms. Just as administration officials talk about smart power and smart sanctions, when it comes to the UN, we need smart withholding. In our hemisphere, the U.S. approach is one of misplaced priorities. The Havana tyranny has again ramped up its assault against the democracy movement in Cuba, detaining dozens of peaceful protesters, beating mourning mother Reina Luisa Tamayo, and this weekend sending its shameless thugs after the ladies in white. Yet the administration has repeatedly eased regulations on the Castro regime. Just weeks after the latest appeasement, the dictatorship announced its intention to seek a 20-year prison sentence for U.S. citizen Alan Gross, whose show trial starts on Friday. When it comes to those countries that do share our values and our priorities, there appears to be no end to the stall tactics and empty rhetoric. Our partners in Colombia and Panama have gone above and beyond, meeting the politically determined and ever-changing benchmarks placed in the way of long-awaited free trade agreements. Hondurans who fought for their constitution and rule of law against Mel Zelaya's attack on their democracy are still suffering under the veiled reprisals of our State Department. These examples crystallize the complaints that the American people have about foreign assistance programs. My constituents in letters, emails, and talks with me, and through our new interactive feature on the main committee website, foreignaffairs.house.gov, keep asking, what is the return on our investment? Rafael Santana from Miami, whose letter was published in the Miami Herald on Monday, wrote, Quote, "We are the most generous nation in the world, and foreign aid should go to those countries that are friendly to us. When was the last time we heard of goodwill toward America? The majority of us haven't and don't expect to," end quote. Some attempt to obscure the facts through novel ways of slicing and dicing the numbers, but the budget request for international affairs continues the significant increases of recent years. The cumulative $61.4 billion international affairs request is a 42% increase over fiscal year 2008 levels. The increases are more dramatic when we focus on the State Department's own salaries and operations. The $12 billion state programs request is a 25% increase over 2010 actual levels and a nearly 75% increase since 2008. There's also a problem of misplaced priorities. The administration should not propose massive increases in global health and climate change programs while cutting key programs such as the Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Partnership and the Partnership for Regional East Africa Counterterrorism, particularly as al-Qaeda affiliates in Africa set their sights on American targets and American citizens are being captured and killed by Somali pirates. The safety of our men and women serving with distinction in Afghanistan, Madam Secretary, and the country's transition to a more stable and democratic future must forever guide us. Pakistan must also do more to meet the pressing United States concerns, including the release of Raymond Davis, our detained American diplomat, and shifting its approach to Afghanistan away from armed proxies and toward constructive and legitimate political partners. And we must make those decisions in light of the unfortunate fiscal realities facing our government and every American family. Those who complain about diminished levels of international affairs funding need to ask themselves how much less would an insolvent United States of America be able to do. Our funding baseline has to change. The real question is not, is this activity useful, but rather, is this activity so important that it justifies borrowing money to pay for it and further endangering our nation's economy?